So this video will show you how to perform a planar adjustment on a three-dimensional object to give it the illusion of a different perspective when you're looking at it through something such as a reflection or something of that nature. So we'll just get right into it here. We have, of course, a 3D block pretty much in space. It's pretty good to start with something that's fairly simple such as this. Curved objects are obviously much harder. It's very intuitive. You'll have to use the warp a numerous amount of times in order to achieve the same type of perspective shift. So when we're looking at it, basically what we're seeing is it recede into space. So if we were to just draw a couple of lines here to illustrate where the vanishing point is on this puppy, we'd come up with something like this. Which goes to say that if we were to increase the perspective down to here, the line would become that angled, such as there. So you can see that we've kind of already built up, the way that it's going to look. And if you always ever need to see the whole thing, you can just go to Image, Reveal All, and it's going to show us the exact vanishing point in space. So there we go. So I'll just leave this open for now. There's no sense of not having it there. So what we're going to do, we're always going to duplicate it just in case we screw something up. We can always come back to it later. And then we're going to start picking this thing apart. Now if we were to just take it and flip it like another reflection for the glasses, what would happen is you would have this huge, oops, there we go. You can see this huge mistake in the perspective. Now we can't really just grab the whole thing and shift it, because what that's going to do is it's just going to forget about this portion right here, so that's no good. So what we have to do literally is select each one of these planes and shift them in perspective. Thankfully Photoshop allows us to do that. So we don't really have to get too complicated with it, we can just jump right in. Now because we're looking at an up plane right here from this angle, it's going to be pretty much not seen, so we won't need to worry about that. What we do is we just grab Shift and Control, and we're going to morph these planes one at a time. Now we won't need that because you're not going to see that from the angle that you're looking at it from. And we don't really have to worry about the top either, because the reflection will simply just fade away before it gets to that point. I'm going to flip this and erase that really quick. You can flip it with Shift Control I. Whoops, don't want to get rid of that part. You need that part. There we go. We're going to turn it back again. We're just going to line it up. Now this front part, given the angle, this up plane will probably be noticeable, so we're going to keep that. Once again, Control T, then Shift Control, and grab the handle. That looks about right. So we'll deselect it and then select the final plane, which is just this front plane right here. And of course, if you want to get straight lines when you're making a selection, you can always hold Shift. Okay, so that's pretty close. Now just to make these invisible for a second, you can see that there's a little bit of white behind here, so what we're going to do to get rid of that is to just sample what the color is, start a new layer behind it, oh wait, can't really do that. Now because it's undarkened, we'll have to select one of the lighter colors, or else this whole thing will just get really dark in those areas. And because it's mainly corners and seams, there'll usually be some sort of cast highlight, so it's okay if it gets a little lighter. You just don't want it, the white that's behind it. Now this part, we're going to have to get rid of this white, because obviously looking at this thing from underneath, this isn't a paper thin surface. There's some thickness here, so to create the illusion of depth, we're going to have to get rid of the white and then duplicate this level and then create a little 1-inch kind of thickness under this guy. So we're just going to go ahead and get rid of all the white right here. I'm just going to go up and get rid of that part because there's a significant amount. There we go. Now to make this easy, instead of actually, you could do this two ways. We could simulate the idea of this line by kind of painting in our own, or we could copy this and put it underneath. Either way will take a little bit of time. It's really about what works for you. So I guess this time what we'll just do is kind of just create it ourselves. And all you're going to do is just sort of copy the curvature of the object, and keeping in mind this is in perspective, so it's going to thin out right here and then get thick again, and the perspective will sort of take hold right there. Whoops. And then here it's going to be fairly thick again. Actually, we could just go like that. So once again, we're going to resort to our level underneath. Actually, we're going to do a different one because we're going to need that one, and I'll show you why in a bit. We're just going to take one of the dark colors on the object and paint right on it. Now you're going to see over top like that, but that's okay for now because it's undarkened, of course, so that's why that's happening. So to get rid of that, all we got to do is L for lasso. We're just going to copy this whole section right here, and remember we already removed the white, so we should be able to get away with it pretty easily. And we're just going to take it and lay it right over top with the white gone, of course. So if we move it into position now, press V for that. It doesn't seem to want to go. Oh, there we go. Now to match something up, what you can do is lower the opacity of the level on top until the shapes line up perfectly. And that's about the right spot. Actually. There, why not? Now, of course, right here, this is overlapping the object on top, so you can do two things. Either you can rearrange the layer stack to get it in the right location, or we could just mask it out ourselves. So if we hit that, and rather, you always want to use a mask as opposed to erasing, just in case you ever have to come back and use that area. If you erase it, it's gone forever. Or at least for 15 steps, or if you have a snapshot, then you can resort to that, but this way is a little bit cleaner. And then of course we're going to want to repeat the same thing for this section, but once again we'll have to get rid of the white. Actually, because the color underneath is just so close already, you can probably just leave it like that. Now there's one more finishing touch to this thing. First we're going to want to clean up these obscure lines hanging off the side. So we find what level they're on, and we just going to highlight and delete. And right here as well. You don't have to be as picky with the top section because no one's even going to see it. Now the last part, obviously this thing right in here is not going to be as white as it shows. And the reason for that is because there's no light in there. It's going to have a shadow, so we can gray out that area, and you could either paint underneath of it, which is what we'll opt to do in this section, or in this case, or you could create a selection and just kind of color it yourself. But I think it's a little bit easier just to paint in, just to do it this way. The key thing when you're presenting the products is to keep everything clean. We don't want it to look like a muddy painting. So the best thing to do is to once again create another level, and we'll just use black and we'll fill it. And then after it's all filled, we can adjust the opacity just to get the look we want. But now the thing is that doesn't really look too good because there will be a little bit of light there. So let's just start it again, and this time we'll use a gradient instead. So that's pretty close. Now what we'll want to do is merge all the levels except for the top level and the shadow into one level. So that's what we've done. We've merged it all together. So we're going to adjust the opacity just slightly. Now you can see our reflection starting to take shape. And finally we're going to quick mask it, and we're already on gradient, so that's good. There we go. Now one final touch, obviously the shadow is not going to come in front of the object like that. So we'll just erase it. That doesn't really look too good either. Maybe just a halfway erase instead. There, that's a little bit better. Cool. And there you go. That's a reflection with a planar warp.